and we're gonna jump right into this today. So, as the first part of the series, what we're going to do is go through some of the core elements of SEO, things you have to do when you're first starting, and that really surrounds keywords and how to pick them and what to do with them. And you've probably heard a lot of keywords, the word, just the word itself, keywords, and what you do with them. So we're going to go through some of the basics, and I'm going to cover as much as I can for somebody who has no idea what this is about, and try to give some nuggets for people who maybe have a little bit more experience with SEO and are a little bit further down the road. So we'll put it all together in a way that hopefully will make sense. You'll get some good takeaways that you can really start applying immediately to try to help your business, try to help your website become more successful, driving your business. So the agenda is going to go something like this. We're going to talk a little bit about what the overarching goal of what we're trying to do, how that relates to keywords, and how search engines see those key phrases, and how to kind of put it all together to make it work for your website. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into this. And what I wanted to do first was just really to show very specifically what we mean by keywords, what you're going to do with them. So once let's say you pick these keywords that are going to be for your website, what exactly do you do with them? And here's just a quick example. So we have this website here, and the website is mulfordwritingschool.com. And for any of you here in the DC area, this is in Centerville, just in Fairfax County there. And this page is about their writing lessons. So the key phrase here, the key phrase idea that we're focused on is writing lessons in Northern Virginia. And so what we're going to do is take that key phrase and come up with several variations and permutations of it and make sure it appears in different places across the website. So you see a couple of circles here. In the top left, you see the title tag. These are the little words that populate the tabs in your browser. But they're actually something very important for search engines. And here you see the title tag is Writing Lessons in Northern Virginia, or Northern VA - Mulford Writing School in Centerville, Virginia. Then in the first, in the body copy, you see Writing Lessons as the main headline. And then in the first sentence of body copy, you see horseback riding lessons in Northern Virginia, with Virginia spelled out. And then further on down, you see some text, bullet points, lots of information about horses, things talking about things like seat and stirrups and balance exercises and things like that. Those are just kind of filler to provide context, but you also see things like equestrian farm in Centerville, VA. And so basically what we've done here is we've taken this idea of this key phrase, writing lessons in Northern Virginia, and we placed it strategically in different places across the website. So what we're going to be discussing today is how do you come up with these key phrases? And then in future webinars, we'll talk about, okay, now you have these 2 or 3 or 4 key phrases that you're going to optimize a page for. Now let's go through the physical mechanics of building a web page and adding those in the way you should in order to optimize your website. So there's another example here as we're going through this page, just in the interest of space. The gallery below, you can see these examples of where key phrases are inserted. And you can see in the gallery below, when you expand the picture, there's a caption and also alt text, alternate text, which again, as we get into the further webinars, we'll get into the mechanics of how you add these. For today, I wanted to make it clear, once you get a key phrase, here's what you're going to do with it so that it makes a little bit more sense. So on the road to developing your list of key phrases, figuring out what phrases am I going to use, we need to kind of think through a couple of things, and this is not a waste of time, this goal setting thing, although a lot of times when you hear business speakers say, we've got to talk about goal setting, it's like, oh boy, eye roll time. But not in this case. It's really important. And the reason is because what you're trying to get somebody to do once they're on your website is really key to what key phrases you're going to use to try to optimize your page. So really the first step is to sit down and really think, what am I trying to get somebody to do specifically for your website? Think about this as you're listening to me present this. When somebody gets to your site, what exactly, very, very specifically, are you trying to get them to do? And that could mean picking up the phone and calling for a reservation. It could mean filling out a contact form to get a quote. It could mean getting them to pay an invoice on your site. There are a whole, it's endless depending on what line of work you're in, or what your business is, what the goal for your website is. But it's super important for you to figure that out and really have a firm idea for a given page on your website, not your whole site, but for the page in question, what specifically are you trying to get them to do? So in the case of our riding lessons page, for example, it's pretty clear. We're trying to get people to pick up the phone and call. We want them to schedule a riding lesson. But let's say you're a restaurant and somebody finds your website. What are you trying to get them to do? And today, that might be different than what it was this time last year. Maybe this time last year you wanted somebody who goes to your site to get the phone and make a reservation, whereas maybe this year it's use the online ordering form to order carryout. Who knows? The point is that you're going to talk to people in a different way depending on what you're trying to get them to do on your site. So going through this exercise of, let's pick 3 goals for your page. What are you trying to get people to do? There might only be one, but there might be 1 or 2 or 3 depending on what you're doing. But you really have to have your mind thoroughly wrapped around what action you're trying to elicit from the user once they get to your site. And that will help you figure out, is the keyword going to be call us today, or is it going to be best happy hours in DC, or is it going to be drink coupons for restaurant XYZ? All of those things have different different goals in mind. One might elicit a phone call, one might elicit enter an email address to receive a coupon, and so on and so forth. So you need to put that into your mind before you can get to kind of the second step, which is, okay, now you have your goal, you know what you want people to do. The next step is to figure out who you want to do it. So to do this, we talk about buyer personas. And there are companies that literally charge thousands and thousands of dollars to develop a buyer persona for you. We're not going to do that here. We're going to tell you how to do it in about 3 or 4 minutes. So, but you have to understand who your buyer persona is, what they want, who they are. And let me explain this for a minute so that it makes sense in this context. If, let's use our restaurant example again. If you have a little Italian bistro out in a suburb, the person who you want to market to is very different than if you have a sports bar just outside an arena in the inner city. You're marketing to a completely different set of people most of the time. Sometimes it might be the same, it might be crossover, sure. But for a given page on your website, you're going to be talking to 2 very different people, even if you have a similar business line. So we have to decide for a given page on your website who we're talking to, not just what we want them to do, which is your goal, but who exactly we're talking to. So we develop these things called buyer personas. And this is an idealized, generalized version of your ideal customer. So as a business owner, I could ask you, who is the person? Describe to me the person you want to show up on your at your website, on a page on your website. Who do you want that person to be? Do you want it to be an 18-year-old college student, or do you want it to be a 36-year-old professional who works on Capitol Hill? Who do you want it to be? Or something in the middle? Do you want it to be a mother of 4 who lives in Ashburn? You know, doesn't it could be anybody, but you have to have this in mind. And the reason you have to have it in mind is, again, because how you're going to, if you're going to try to convince somebody to take some action to reach your goal that we already talked about, you have to be talking to that person in a way that's going to make sense and hit home for that individual. So you can't rightly market to somebody who's looking for a romantic dinner 60 miles outside of town the same way that you would market to the guy who's looking for a happy hour with his buddies after work, or before a big game, or before a concert, or something like that. Totally different. So the key phrases that you're going to pick to optimize a given page in your website are going to be different depending on, 1, what you're trying to get them to do, and 2, who you're trying to get to take that action. So that's where these buyer personas come in. And buyer personas can be a fun exercise if you have other people on your team or in your management chain. This is a great exercise to get on a Zoom or sit around a table and ask everybody to chime in. Who is our ideal customer? What do they look like? It very, very specifically. And the more you can crystallize this in your mind, the better you'll be able to target market to that person, and hone in. And I want to address, just for a minute, you can certainly have more than one buyer persona, and it's very easy, just because of the way the web is. You can create different pages for that kind of target different personas. So we'll talk about how to write that content in just a minute. But some of the questions you can ask yourself are listed here for really developing this person, this idealized client or customer. Ask yourself these questions about who they are. And for everybody on the webinar today, different businesses, I know there are a lot of different businesses and vertical markets represented here. You'll have some very widely ranging type people. And so think these through, figure out what's driving what is the impetus behind a search for somebody when they want to search for your business, or when you want your business to show up in the search online. So anybody have a question? Nope. Okay. But certainly chime in. There are few of us enough today so that we can definitely take a quick question if you want to hit the chat, or let me know and we can address that. So 2 things I want you to take away from these first couple of slides. I don't want to dwell on them too much. 1 is figure out what you're trying to get people to do once they get to this page on your website. And 2, figure out who they are so that you can best talk to them. So let's get into keywords. How do you pick them, knowing those things? So we're gonna talk a little bit about taking what you want them to do, who the person is, and then drop them into this, where are they in their mind, in the buying cycle. And buying cycle sounds like a fancy thing, but we do it all the time. Everybody does it almost every day with the amount of stuff we're buying online these days. You go through these phases, and you can get really crazy with planning out this in a marketing, for a marketing geek, with how long the buying cycle is. But really it comes down to 3 things: is this initial idea, this initial awareness, and then, okay, I need to figure out what choices there are, and then bam, I'm going to make the decision. So these are the kind of the 3 phases of the buying cycle. And if we apply them to, you can really apply them to anything, but let's use them with our happy hour example. If somebody is sitting at work and they want to go to happy hour, they do a quick, they're texting with their group, and somebody says, hey, let's hit happy hour. What should we do? And the next guy fires up his browser and he types in happy hour specials, and realizes very quickly that happy hour specials can mean lots of different things in lots of different places. So you immediately go from awareness, happy hour specials, to consideration, happy hour specials in DC. And then once you see, the article on the DC blog that says, here are the top 5, happy hour places in DC, you find 2 of them. And the last search, the decision is directions to restaurant XYZ. So that person just went through a very quick buying cycle where they went from this idea, this awareness of a thing they want, all the way to executing it. Now think about it in terms of a hard good. And a classic example in the search engine optimization world is on running shoes. So think about what you do if you decide you need a new pair of running shoes, and you go through this buying cycle that's easily exemplified. So first search might be for running shoes. You quickly realize, well, you're going to see stuff for guys who are doing sprints at the collegiate level, and you're going to see blog after blog from Runner's World about choosing the best running shoe, and on and on and on and on. Well, you quickly realize that you want a stability shoe after reading a couple of those blogs. So your consideration phase becomes stability running shoe. You're narrowing in your searches, your keywords, based on where you are in the buying cycle. And then after you do a bunch of searches for stability running shoes, you read up more blogs from more running websites and so forth, and you hone in on, you want your ASICs. You want your ASICs running shoes. So your last search, your decision search, is best price for ASICs gel Kayano or something like that. And what you've done is you've gone from awareness, which is a very general search, through consideration, which is a little bit more refined, into the decision phase, which is very well targeted, a very specific thing that you want to take action on right then. So kind of summarizing where we are, you figure out what you want people to do when they're on your web page. You want to figure out who you're talking to so that you can present the information in a way that's going to make sense to them. And 3, you want to figure out where that person is in the buying cycle so that your page can be crafted with language that makes sense. So let's get in and take it to the next step, where you can actually plan using key phrases. You can lay out your content for your website. And this is a chart, and I wish I could give a source for this chart, but I don't remember where I got it from. I think it was from the AMA some time ago. But it's great because it helps you lay out exactly what content, what pages on your website you want to create helps you identify keywords for each of those pieces of content. So over we have our persona name, and let's just call our persona Frank because it works. So our persona's name is Frank, and we want Frank to go to a happy hour in DC. In the awareness stage, your content ideas could be things like key phrases like best happy hour in DC. Somebody could easily type in best happy hour in DC. They're aware of the problem. They want to search for as much as they can. They want a big list of places. So best happy hour in DC could be something of awareness. You could, and that would be one content idea. Or you could do something like Italian restaurants in DC or something like that. Whatever. Consideration is slightly more refined. Something like, how about best or sports bars in DC, or sports bar in Adams Morgan, or something like that, a little bit more refined. And then when you get to your decision, over in that last column, your decision page key phrase could be something like reservations for XYZ restaurant in DuPont Circle, something like that, something very, very specific to a decision the user has made. And in this way, you can brainstorm ideas, content ideas, for which you can get a set of key phrases. So the idea is, in your awareness phase, you may have 2 or 3 pages of content that you get ideas for, and you can go search for the key phrases that are going to make sense for that piece of content. Same thing with consideration, same thing with decision. So you're taking your goal, what you want people to do, who you're trying to get to do it, and figuring out where in the buying cycle they are, and crafting a piece of content on your website that you'll optimize using keywords that fit all those criteria. So hopefully I'm laying this out in a way that will allow you to kind of think through what exactly are we supposed to do with these keywords once we get them. And that's really what these first several slides are designed to do, is explain how we use them to craft pages that are going to convert, that are going to take a user who lands on that page and turn them into a paying customer or client. So with that, I actually want to go into some keyword planning. So I'll show you some of the tools we use and give you some of the data we use, and talk about some of the decisions you're going to need to make as you're going through this keyword research exercise. So what you're looking at now is some keyword research based on this idea that I've been talking about for happy hours in DC. And you see a couple of things. We get this directly from Google, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But what we see are some keywords by relevance, sorted here in the far left column, average monthly searches, and the level of competition. So this all speaks for itself. The number of monthly searches is the average number of monthly searches over the last 12 months. It also gives a little graphical representation of the trend for that particular key phrase. You can, with these particular key phrases, you can kind of see what happened, 10, 12 months ago to these searches. And then the little, starting to come back and starting to go down and so forth. And then competition will be shown as null, low, medium, and high. So the idea here is that we want to find, really there are kind of two sides to the keyword quantitative analysis. There is the number of searches and the amount of competition. And so ultimately we want to find high searches, low competition. And with that mix, we know that the page is going to be more likely to show up in search engine results. The key, though, is we want the right keyword. It's got to be the right keyword by relevance to also have high searches and low competition. So let's take a look at the actual tool. And I'm going to flip over to Firefox here and go to the Google Keyword Planner. So this is to get to this tool, it doesn't cost anything to use, but you do need to have a Google Ads account. And once you're in your Google Ads account, you'll go to Tools and then the Keyword Planner to get here. And what I did was just went in to try to get some new keyword ideas for these general topics. So you can see the seed words, that's SEED, the seed words. I entered in Washington, D.C. happy hour, best happy hour in D.C., pregame restaurant in Washington, D.C., just to try to see exactly what Google is going to show me. And so when you click get results, you come up with this list. And it actually is a good list. It's pretty interesting that because it's going to allow me to really show how you would choose one over the other. When we're talking about this example, Washington, D.C. happy hour, this is a really good awareness key phrase. That is somebody who is, oh, we're going to go to happy hour in D.C. Let me figure out where to go. John told me to figure out where we're going to go. I'm going to do a key phrase search. It's awareness. It's early in the buying cycle. I'm going to do that search. But the thing is, this next example, best happy hour in DC, that is also a good early buying cycle key phrase. They're both similar in that regard. So the relevance of the key phrases here that we're presented with are kind of on par with one another. They're similar, both in the same phase of the buying cycle. They both are speaking to the same person, somebody who's looking for a happy hour in DC. They're both meeting all the same criteria as it relates to keyword selection But then we got to go to the quantitative analysis, which is, well, how many searches does this have and how much competition is there? And here there's a clear winner. One of these two phrases is 9 or 10 times has 9 or 10 times the number of searches in a month as the other one, and they're both low competition. So here's one of those cases. It's not always this cut and dry, but it is for this. If you're going to optimize a page on your website, let's say you have a restaurant in DC and you're going to optimize a page about it for happy hour, and your happy hour specials and all that. There's no question in this, just based on this research, that the key phrase that should be kind of top of mind for you is best happy hour in DC. There are lots of searches for it, low competition, and the other words that are similar to it have far fewer number of monthly searches. So this is a no-brainer for this particular application. And when we go down, we see that Google has used its database to come up with other keyword ideas and also present the data associated with them. So you see, as you get lower in average monthly searches, you're going to get much more specific. So happy hour DuPont Circle, 390 again compared to, what was it, 1,300 for best happy hour in DC, and Navy Yard happy hour and so forth. So the lower you get with the average monthly searches, the fewer people there are searching for it. That's what that means. And really, you'll see more and more obscure phrases like this guy here, best HH in DC. Now, I could see somebody doing that search all day long. I know people are doing that search, but it makes a heck of a lot more sense to optimize your page with a key phrase like best happy hour in DC. That's all spelled out, when you get like 20 or 30 times the number of searches in a given month. So that's how you would first start with the goal. What are you trying to get people to do? Show up at your restaurant for happy hour. 2, who is going to be showing up? Well, in this case, the who is anybody looking for a happy hour. So you're probably looking at, in DC anyway, you're probably looking at professionals between 25 and 45. And I'm guessing here, brainstorming, but 25 to 45-year-old professionals who live in and around DC, something like that. All the old people like me moved out to the suburbs a long time ago. So, but this gives you an idea of how you can do that. Now, let me show you something else. I'll do a quick search for, I just want to change up the search a little bit, and I'll show you, to use another example. How about best running shoes? And that's all I'm going to put in there, and we'll see what Google comes up with. Now, what's interesting here is that my location is set for just the Washington, D.C. metro, the major service area, just the D.C. MSA. So these numbers are only for the people in the surrounding area. But you can see best running shoes for women, best running shoes for men. Here is going to be really important to hone in on that, that buyer persona, because clearly there are 2,400 searches versus 1,600 searches just by adding the qualifier for women, for men. And so that's a big deal. And you're going to want to use that, because in that consideration phase is where you're going to really pull people into your site, complete the sales process, and then maybe even get them right through the decision. So, so I just wanted to give you a quick example of how you can use this. Incidentally, we're not here to talk about paid advertising, but if there's enough data, Google will give you the cost per click range for each of these key phrases if you ever do paid advertising, for example. And so it's always interesting to see, here's a wide range, 99 cents to $12 clicks. So just so you know what those things are. if you come across it after using this tool. So with that, you've got an idea of how to take an idea of what you want people to do once they get to a page on your website, who you're talking to, and then figure out what key phrases you're going to use that match the point in the buying cycle for that particular user. And this is how we're gonna take key phrases and apply them to your site. Whoopsie, sorry about that. I'm gonna go down to our next slide and talk about something really, really important. The developing a key phrase is, people used to talk a lot about key phrase ranking. Hey, I'm gonna rank for this particular key phrase. And I can't tell you the number of times over the last 20 years that a client has called or emailed and said, hey, my boss went to Google and he couldn't find us online, or he couldn't find us for XYZ product online. We want to show up for that product. And my response is always the same, which is, well, where was he when he typed in the key phrase? What search engine was he using? What specific phrase did he type in? What specific search query was used to try to find your page? And on and on and on. The reason that it gets frustrating to try to rank for one specific word is that Google, that's not the best way to get lots of traffic from Google that's targeted. And this is why. What you're looking at here is the search demand curve. And this exists online in many different forms. You'll see a similar chart here. This one is taken from Moz.com, which is a pretty reputable place for SEO information. I would encourage you to go there and get information if you'd like to follow up on this. But this really spells out why picking one high traffic key phrase is less effective than picking out a tightly grouped set of key phrases that all have to do with the same thing for a given page on your site. So let me try to explain this just a little bit. If you go and play around with Google Keyword Planner, you may see something like the phrase happy hour and compare it to best happy hour in Washington, D.C. and say, well, wait a second. Happy hour has medium competition and it has 27,000 searches a month versus 1,300, whatever. So, hey, that might be a really good word to target on my website. But you shouldn't do that. And the reason is because of this curve, this chart that we're looking at here. Very, very high traffic, high search volume key phrases tend to be a few things. First, they tend to be very, very competitive. So if you type in, for example, running shoes is one that comes to mind, you're going to be looking at the top listings in Google are going to be Zappos, Nordstrom, Amazon, probably. These behemoth websites that you frankly are not going to beat. So trying to optimize a page for a word that's hyper competitive is just not going to happen. But even if you take away the competitive nature of these high traffic key phrases, the numbers that we're looking at here are even more compelling. The high traffic keywords, yes, they have a high number of searches, but they don't represent the big bulk of what's going on online. And here we have the number of key phrases as a percent of search traffic. And if you look at what they call on Moz, the chunky middle and the long tail, together they represent 82% of all search traffic. So these long tail words, key phrases like best happy hour in Washington, D.C., That's a long tail word. It has best happy hour in Washington, D. Has 6 words in that one key phrase, in that one quote unquote keyword. Words like that make up 82% of all searches online. So this becomes a kind of a math problem. It's, do you want to try to optimize something that typically has very high competition and for which only accommodates 10 or 15% of search volume? Or do you want to go after lots and lots and lots of key phrases that make up 82% of search volume and that probably has much lower competition? And when you look at it in terms of just the pure math problem of it all, it becomes really obvious that going after the chunky middle and long tail key phrases just makes a lot more sense. You'll compete more readily. You'll get higher rankings for more key phrases, and you're appealing to a much wider percent of search traffic by volume. So in this way, we want to come up with a group of key phrases that we're going to optimize a page for, and which takes us back to the example at the beginning of the presentation where you have, we don't want to rank just for riding lessons in Northern VA. We don't want to rank just for that phrase. We want to rank for riding lessons in Northern VA, riding lessons in Northern Virginia, NOVA, one string, Nova riding lessons, beginner riding lessons in Centerville, Virginia riding lessons, and all the permutations and variations of that phrase you can think of, we want to rank for on that one specific page. So the days of 2004 or 3, where we would optimize a page for a single key phrase and really bank on that phrase driving our traffic, those days are long gone, because Google has become so sophisticated at understanding what a page is about and ranking that page for lots and lots of different search queries, that now it makes sense to feed Google the information it needs to allow that to happen, to allow the page to show up in search result pages for all the variants and permutations of a given phrase. So that's really the key behind this. With regard to the keyword planner, there are kind of what you should use it for and what you shouldn't use it for, based on all this. Definitely you can use it for trending. We saw next to each phrase in the keyword planner that there was a little graph that showed the last 12 months of keyword traffic. And obviously 2020 was a weird time, especially for restaurant oriented key phrases. But let's just for a moment pretend that it's a normal time. You can really see seasonality appear for a lot of different search queries. You can see the seasonality appear in the 12-month trends on how they appear. Sometimes of the year, certain key phrases are more popular than other times, and it doesn't take much thought to come up with examples on what might happen. Riding lessons is one; it's going to spike in the spring. Running shoes, that will spike in the spring and probably carry through summer. And you've got early fall is marathon and race season, and so you can see trending is a really important part of this. You're going to be looking for high traffic and low competition phrases that also match the relevance that you're after. So you're going to pick a goal, pick a persona, pick a buying cycle stage, and research until you have a set of key phrases, usually a couple, 2, 3, 4, maybe more, that are all very, very tightly related, that are all essentially the same thing, but different. And that, riding lessons in Northern VA, Nova riding lessons, Centerville, Virginia riding school, and so forth. You get the picture. So you want that little group of key phrases that you're going to use in these key elements on your site. What you shouldn't do with keyword tool is, it's funny, the keyword tool that we did that sample search for, they all had nice round numbers: 1,300 searches, 600 searches, 390 searches. Those numbers are not specific and real. That is, if you're ranked number 1, you shouldn't expect 1,300 searches a month. The search engine result pages are different. They're changing all the time. And these number, so you're going to get a different amount of traffic, even if you have a high ranking, is my point. The numbers that you see in the keyword tool are to give you a relative idea of the power of a key phrase compared to another version. So we use them just to get a relative feel for how strong the key phrase is. We also don't want to pick a single key phrase. We just spend a few minutes talking about we want a group of tightly related key phrases. And then the CPC data, I mentioned in passing that it gives you click costs. If you're planning a pay-per-click campaign and you use the keyword planner, don't believe what it says are going to be the click costs, because they're always wrong. That said, you can use it the same way the traffic numbers are presented. You can use it to get a relative indicator of how expensive a word's going to be. So if you see the range on one key phrase as $8 to $25 and the other one from 99 cents to $3, you can be sure that one will be less expensive than the other, but don't count on it being exact, is the point. So ultimately, what you're going to try to do is come up with this small group of key phrases that you're going to use to optimize a given page on your site. And I want to talk for just a few minutes about how exactly search engines work and interpret that information. This triangle of search is a great visual, because it kind of crystallizes in your mind how search engines are going to view a page on your site and decide whether or not to rank it. First, you identify the key phrase or key phrases in this case that you're going to try to come up with for your piece of content. Second is you actually create the page of content. So you create the page about happy hour in DC or about riding lessons in DC or whatever. And then part three is there need to be links out there on the web at large off of your site. There need to be links that point back to that page. And those are backlinks. That's going to be part three of this series, backlinking. So we'll get to this number 3 later. But for today, what we're talking about is identifying these key phrases, this group of key phrases, and then building a piece of content around them. So when you build that piece of content, now you have this page and it has your key phrases sprinkled into all these key parts of it. What happens? And I want to give you a quick rundown of what happens when a crawler, spider, robot, Googlebot, they're all the same thing. When the search engine crawler hits your site, what is happening? And it works in this kind of, I've laid out a 6-step process. It's it is infinitely more complex than this, but this should give you an idea of how this is going to happen. First, you create your page. You go to your WordPress website or your Wix site or whatever you have, and you build your new page, and you enter your key phrase in the title tag, the meta description, the headline, the body copy, and the alt text, and all these places, which we'll get into more detail on in webinar 2. We'll go through the mechanics of that. But you build this page, and now it's up there. The crawler hits that page by fetching the URL. So it'll go to a specific page on your site and examine, step 3, these key elements. And these key elements, I just rattled them off, but they're the title tag, also called an SEO tag or an SEO title, the meta description tag, the header tags, which is the headline on a page, the body copy, the text content. It will examine images on your site and look for alt text or image titles. And then it'll look for any links that are on the page that you created, links to other pages on your site and so forth. It'll actually use those links on the page to go fetch those and look at them. So in that way, it's quote unquote crawling. It's getting a page, looking for links on the page, and then going to get all those pages and then repeating the process over and over again. But the bottom line is that it's going to examine these on-page elements, title, meta description, header, body copy, alt text, and make sure that there's nothing spammy going on. And it uses sophisticated algorithms to do that, to make sure that you're not trying to trick them into something. And then if everything checks out, which in all legitimate cases it does, it will drop that page into its index and it's ready to be served up in search engine results. So when it examines all those key on-page elements in step 3, it's looking for key phrases, variations of key phrases, and permutations of it, of that phrase, so that when it is indexed, when that page is dropped into the Google index, and somebody does a key phrase search, a search in Google, Google can then look into its index and say, oh, I have a page that's about all those things. Here it is, and it will show it in the search engine result page. So that's the basic element to how search engines are going to work. And the key here is that because the crawler is going to look at each of these on-page elements, see all the key phrases contained therein, and understand what the page is about, it will then let that page or serve up that page in response to any number of many search queries, not just one. So, and that's the goal. The goal is for anybody who does a search that's even that's related to what you want. We want Google to serve up that page. So we use a tight knit group of key phrases that all mean the same thing. So our key takeaways here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hopefully be able to answer some questions here at the end, and make sure everybody has some breathing room before their 1 o'clock meeting. So I'm going to go through the key takeaways and then open this up for questions. We want key phrases to be placed into your web pages so that Google has a chance to see them clearly when they crawl the site, and then serve up your pages of content for search queries that are going to bring the right user to your site. Therefore, you have to know what you want them to do once they get there, the goal. You have to know who you want to take that goal. You need to know where they are in the buying cycle, and then you'll be able to serve them up content that they want. So knowing your audience and knowing what your goal is when you choose your keywords is of the highest importance. Focusing on that long tail. Don't try to get hung up on ranking, quote unquote, number 1 for a specific key phrase. That's not how you're going to get the best traffic. What you want instead is to rank for a whole bunch of different key phrases, all the variations and permutations of a tightly related group of key phrases. Understanding that Google will look at these key on-page elements, title, meta description, header, text, and alt text, and putting variants of your key phrases in those areas is going to help you rank for lots of different key phrases. And then analytics is not part of this, but we're going to address it in the second webinar in the series. But once you do all this, then you have to watch your analytics, see what's happening, see how many people are coming to this page, what their user behavior is on the page, and whether or not they convert into a client or customer, or whether they take that action from your goal defined at the very beginning, and then repeat the process over and over again forever is how you do it. SEO is an ongoing process. At this point, I'd like to open it up to any questions you might have about any of the information we've covered, or maybe something that we didn't spend much time on. Any questions, you can unmute yourself and speak right up if you have anything you'd like to ask. And we are going to have this recorded webinar posted. So if you need to go back and review something, or there's some piece you want to take a closer look at, you'll be able to do that. And just as two administrative items, one is that in the next segment of this webinar series, we're going to physically go through the process of optimizing a page on your site. So we're going to show you specifically how to do it, what the mechanics of optimizing a page on your site looks like. And then in part 3, we're going to talk about off-page optimization, which is the process of making your site, developing domain authority for your site so that Google likes it more. And beyond that, if anybody wants specialized help or need some information specific to your website, we are happy to provide some audit help or give some very specific information for you. If you want to contact me off the webinar, you can always reach me at harry@conversionpipeline.com, or use one of our forms on conversionpipeline.com. You can reach us that way as well. Mention that you're from the webinar, and it will help us serve you best. So if there are no questions, that's going to wrap it up for today. We look forward to seeing you on the second installation of the webinar, where we'll get into web mechanics of an optimized page. And have a great rest of your Thursday.